Okay, turn it off. That's all we can afford.
What's going on, you guys? Steve here, and today we're going to switch it up. In this video, I want to break down the roster for one of my favorite video games of all time, On Oratorio Tangram. For those of you who may not know, it's an arena fighter for the Sega Dreamcast. It was an arcade game. Originally, it's the sequel to the original On the Sega Saturn. It's a twin-stick game, and it has some very interesting mechanics. It plays very similar to a fighting game, but yeah, the controls just look really obscure. It's really unfortunate how a really innovative franchise like VO just fell into complete obscurity. I might reference the game Wiki page in this video from time to time, so I'll drop a link in the description if you want to check that out. Where do we want to go? I guess we can start with Temujin. That's probably the best way to start. Temujin is the flagship character of the On franchise. He's a really cool character. He's kind of the run-of-the-mill Ryu of the game, I guess you could say. Every character has all these different nuances, from how much health they have to their damage output, the activation for their attacks. They have different super inputs, the range for their melees. Temujin is a very safe, middle-of-the-road type character. He's going to require you to know the basic mechanics. You can't just run and gun and just click triggers and win the game. You're going to have to know what you're doing to a degree. He doesn't require as much know-how as some of the other characters. He has a grenade attack that I would say is most effective in defense, oddly enough. You can chuck his grenade out there for defense to block big attacks, big hits. They're really good for creating space and kind of zoning out your opponent. He has really good turbo weapons that do really high damage, but they're heavily punishable. You will just be standing there and you can take some hits that can change the whole trajectory of the round. You can go from winning the round to losing real fast if you take a decent amount of hits with Temujin. So yeah, his moveset is pretty linear, but yeah, he's pretty safe, I would say. He's not a bad character, but he's not the best either. He has some pretty decent melees. I would say his melees are safe. Some of the characters, it takes a while to kind of wind them up and get them out. But with Temujin, they come out pretty quick. Really good movement too. I would say he's one of the faster characters in the game. Fei Yen. I would say Fei Yen is the first lady of On. Even though her character design is pretty iconic and synonymous with this franchise, she's not the greatest character in my opinion. She's one of the most interesting characters and I enjoy playing with her, but yeah, probably not your best option. It's kind of crazy because in the 2000s, she was considered a top tier, but now not so much. If you look at the Tanita Cup and some of the competitions, most people aren't using Fei Yen. So Fei Yen is the second fastest character in the game, I would say, behind Cypher. Cypher is a movement demon, and Fei Yen is right behind Cypher. Her damage output for projectiles is not great. It's probably some of the weakest in the game. And she doesn't have a lot of health, so you're just constantly going to be on your toes trying to move and poke and prod and poke and prod. So yeah, you're just going to do this cat and mouse game with Fei Yen more often than not. Fei Yen does have a really good melee, I would say. Melee damage is probably your best option, so kind of closing that gap with your movement and trying to punish, that is a good strategy. Something else that's really interesting about Fei Yen is she has this mechanic called hyper mode, where essentially when she goes under 50% health, she gets this boost in damage output and in speed. It's very reminiscent of the K-Groove mechanic in CVS 2 or in Samurai Showdown. It's kind of a high risk, high reward situation because she doesn't have much health, so it's like, do you really want to risk taking a bunch of damage just to hit a little bit harder? So yeah, that boils down to you as a player. One of the weaker characters in the game, but some pretty interesting mechanics. I would say the most compelling character mechanically is Fei Yen. Raiden. Raiden is one of my favorite characters. The bulky tank. I believe Raiden is the slowest character in the game, but has the most HP. Oddly enough, Raiden has the fastest diagonal movement in the game, which is kind of strange because normally I don't use diagonal movement, but yeah, that is a thing for whatever reason. More often than not, when I'm using Raiden, I'm kind of just reading the opponent and kind of gauging when they're dropping down from an air dash or something, and then I just launch my center weapon, which is a high damage beam. All of Raiden's attacks are punishable because he has this really slow startup. He doesn't have really good melees, but if you can connect on a punish with some of his projectiles and his beams, you're gonna win. Some of these characters, you can take them out in 1 or 2 hits because he does a bunch of damage. But again, because he's kind of slow and he has this big startup that you can gauge and project, yeah, it's kind of high risk, high reward as well. But the trade-off is that Raiden has more health than everyone else, so you can afford to have a few whiffs or take some damage. Fairly slow movement on the ground and in the air, but he does insane damage if you can make it connect. Cypher, I would say, is my favorite character in the game, but there are some trade-offs. Cypher has insane movement, the fastest character in the game, can operate on 3 different planes. There's really high air movement. There's kind of the basic air movement where everybody else operates, and then you can operate on the ground. So Cypher can go up higher than everyone else and you can just rain down hell. But the trade-off with the insane movement and the high damage is this character has no health. You can take this character out really fast. So you have to be very savvy and crafty with your movement, because 2 hits and the round is over. Cypher isn't the most viable in that regard, but I think it's just really interesting to try and figure it out. Having that superior movement is what makes this character interesting. That's really the gimmick, is just that you can get super shifty with how you move. Grizvok. I would say Grizvok is the easiest character in the game to figure out for any type of newcomer. He's a very spammy character. He's really slow, but because he spams so much, it doesn't require you to really understand too much of the mechanics. And he has pretty decent health like Raiden. Not as much as Raiden, but decent health. So you can just get super spammy and just keep the other opponent running and keeping them on their toes. That's pretty much it. The melees aren't that great because this character, it has a huge startup window. So there's this whole animation before they come out, and if you can see it coming, you can just dip out. Really slow character, but high damage output, and that's kind of the trade-off. That's basically it. You can just get super spammy. The moveset is very linear. Spesinef. This is a character I've been poking around with a lot lately. Really low health, really slow movement, but really high damage output. The movement is actually really bad on this character. Like, the air dashing is awful. The ground dashing is awful. You can't really move too much. But because Spesinef has such high damage output, you don't really need to move. Another trade-off on this character is that the cooldown on attacks is really, really slow. Way slower than everyone else. Everybody else, you can chuck something out and the cooldown is a couple seconds, but with this character, you're going to be waiting maybe closer to 10, maybe over 10 seconds, which is a big deal in a game like this because the rounds are only about a minute. So yeah, if you miss or you whiff, you're just going to be sitting there like a sitting duck for a good minute, just trying to duck and dodge what's coming at you. Most of your opponents are going to be able to get 2 or even 3 hits out before you can get 2. So you have to be very, very strategic with how you operate and when you punish. This character, Ball Bados, this is my least favorite character in the game, I would say, because this character doesn't have much health and the mechanics are just really strange. So this character doesn't necessarily have projectiles. His arms are like drones. So when you use your weapons, your arm launches off and follows the opponent wherever they are on the map. And it just shoots down these little lasers that don't do much damage. And while your arm is off, you can't do anything else. The turbo weapons are okay, but yeah, this isn't the best character in the game. Not even close. This character, Dordre, some of these names, they're kind of strange. I don't really know how to pronounce them. This character is interesting. He's a tank too. This character is basically a massive drill, and he has a lot of drill projectiles, similar to the last one where his arms come off and they're launching at you. This character has a stun attack where they can literally stop you in your tracks and then launch something else out at you to punish. So very slow, but if they catch you just like Raiden, you're cooked. Angelon, this character is really annoying to deal with because she's very spammy too. All of her attacks home in on you, arguably more than everyone else in the game. Everybody else has this kind of lock on. That's kind of the core mechanic of the game, is that you can lock onto your characters and the projectiles will follow. But with this character, she launches out these dragons and they can chase you anywhere on the map. This character will keep you moving the entire time. You really have to read and understand the punish window on this character. It's very different from the others, but once you figure it out, you can't unsee it. In the arcade run of the game, this is always the 5th round or the 5th match, and it always gave me problems. Honestly, fighting Angelon was always my biggest issue in the game. I could beat Tangram, I can run through the whole game, but this fight always gave me the most drama until I figured out the punish window because it's very small and it's very strange. It's kind of interesting, the characters that get really spammy, they have these very obscure windows where you can punish them. You really just have to read it and figure out what it is. because when you find it, they're basically defenseless. They have no real close range defense. Angelon is definitely a long range spammy zoning character because once you get close, you're in there. She's chopped. I don't know how to pronounce these characters, but there's two of them in the Dreamcast version anyways. I'm speaking specifically about the Dreamcast version of the game. So what's interesting about these two characters, B and S, is that they look like soccer characters and they play like soccer characters. I believe this character has a projectile that he kicks kind of like a soccer ball with his foot, which is kind of cool. The problem with these characters is they have really weak projectile damage, so it makes the final boss fight really insufferable and more difficult than it needs to be. But what's so unique is that their melees hit really hard. They probably have the best melees in the game, both of them. They both are very sticky and they have very long range with their melees too. So from a decent range, they can connect and initiate a melee, and they hit very hard and they will stick. What's interesting about a bunch of the characters in the game is that their melees are kind of shaky. Even if you are in the window where you can activate a melee, it's not always going to connect. But with these two characters, it's probably going to connect. That's the trade-off. Basically, they have decent movement, their projectiles kind of suck, but their melees are really, really good. So this game has 3 different unlockable characters. There's Agem, Alpha Temjin, and Raiden. I have all 3 of them unlocked, but I believe you get Alpha Temjin and Alpha Raiden by beating the game in fog mode. And that's essentially where it's pretty self-explanatory, but basically you can't see what you're doing. They put this fog over the map where you basically have to use your audio cues to gauge how to move, how to dodge, and when to attack. Yeah, so basically Alpha Temjin and Alpha Raiden are the original Virtual Lawn versions of the characters. They don't have air movement, there's no air dashing, and there's no turbo weapons either. They're basically handicapped versions of the characters if you just want to add some more difficulty on the game. Don't really enjoy playing with them because they're just so restricting. It's not very fun. It's challenging, but it's not as fun personally. I enjoy the deeper mechanics of the game, of the sequel. The very last character in the game is Agem. I made a whole video on this character. He's honestly a meme character. He's like the Dan of this game. Kind of OP, but kind of jank, kind of trash, because he only has one super that's a self-destruct. It does more damage to you than the other opponent. His movement is terrible, very low health, really high damage output, but everything else surrounding it just makes it really unsufferable and difficult to use. Yeah, so that's the roster of Virtual On Oratorio Tangram. I really enjoy this game. It's very fun figuring out all the different matchups and nuances of the characters, and yeah, you guys let me know what you think in the comments.